Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another is now in theatres, and it's a sprawling, eccentric and deeply ambitious film that feels both like a natural extension of his career and a bold new direction. At its surface, it tells the story of Bob, played with raw vulnerability by Leonardo DiCaprio, a former revolutionary now trying to keep his daughter Willa safe while being hunted by grotesque forces of authority and ideology. What might sound like a straightforward political thriller becomes something much stranger and richer in Anderson's hands. And that is a blend of satire, family drama, surreal action, and biting cultural critique. So in this video, I'm going to be giving you my review of One Battle After Another, discussing why I think the film is a modern masterpiece. There will be brief spoilers in my analysis, so if you haven't seen the film yet, then I would recommend watching it before checking out this video. Before I get into it though, if you want to see more on upcoming films like the One Battle After Another movie, then don't forget to support this upload by giving it a like rating and subscribing to the channel. But without further ado, let's dive into my review for Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another. So for me, One Battle After Another stands out as one of Paul Thomas Anderson's very best films. The sheer scale of the movie is impressive even compared to PTA's already large canvases. It uses a big budget in service of big ideas, whether we think about its action set pieces, a thriller plot arcing across decades, and a moral landscape that feels epic and timely. What makes that scale work though is that it isn't spectacle for its own sake. The story remains invested in character, especially in Bob Ferguson, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, and his daughter Willa. The father-daughter relationship gives heart to the film, showing Bob's past as a revolutionary, his exile, his paranoia, and his struggle to protect Willa. It helps to ground the more outlandish elements, whether it be the chases, the ideological antagonism, and the satire, into something more personal and affecting. Also, as I alluded to, the film's themes feel particularly urgent. It looms large over questions of idealism, extremism, activism, and how one's past choices echo into the present, not just for the protagonist, but for the society in which he lives. Now, the film is loosely inspired by Thomas Pynchon's Vineland, which gives it an undercurrent of weird allegory, satire, and commentary on American political culture. But Anderson weaves that together with real emotional stakes, rather than simply using politics as a backdrop. It does hold a mirror up to our society, but it balances its political commentary without it feeling mere polemic. I think the film is also very technically ambitious. From its cinematography to its editing, from the use of a dynamic score by Jonny Greenwood to the blending of genres in action, satire, drama, and comedy. It pushes Paul Thomas Anderson to experiment while retaining his coherence. I think it keeps you off balance in a good way, as sometimes you're in a classic father-daughter drama, sometimes you're in a high-stakes rescue thriller, and sometimes you're in a biting political satire. And in saying all this, it doesn't feel disjointed, and the transitions are handled with care, building up to emotional crescendos that do feel earned. Now, there's the sense that this film is meaningful both within Anderson's own trajectory and for the moment. For fans of PTA, this isn't a rerun of There Will Be Blood or Magnolia, but instead a synthesis of those ideas. He combines his interest in time, family, moral compromise, and the ways that characters try to live in a world shaped by forces larger than themselves. And because One Battle After Another addresses polarization, extremism, activism, and moral decay, it resonates in a world where those questions feel pressing. It feels bolder than much of his previous work, as it's more willing to lean into both spectacle and ideology, yet never abandoning the intimate emotional core. With all that said, you might think that the film's long runtime and the density of its ideas might make it a challenging watch for some, but I'd argue that those very challenges are part of what makes it one of his best, as it demands something of its audience and it doesn't settle for the easy answers. One of the standout elements for me that makes this all work is the central performances across the film. DiCaprio is featured at the core of the film, and he brings a rare combination of vulnerability, chaos, and unsteady energy to Bob. Bob is a former revolutionary turned father who's partly broken by time, addiction, paranoia, and regret, but still deeply committed to protecting his daughter. The actor captures that tension brilliantly as you see Bob's physical and mental wariness in quieter scenes, and then by turn you watch him scramble, improvise, failing at small things like memory, sobriety, clarity, yet never losing his heart. There is comedy in his disorientation, but DiCaprio never lets it become farce. The emotional threads in his guilt, responsibility, and fear are always audible beneath all the laughs. By anchoring the film in Bob's messy humanity, he makes everything else resonate, like the political absurdity, the action, and all the satire. Then there's Sean Penn as Colonel Stephen J. Lockjaw, who plays the film's antagonist. What makes him so compelling is how over-the-top and yet viscerally menacing he is. He's grotesque, unhinged, and yet filled with swagger, and that sometimes borders on parody but never quite tips over. There's a physicality to his performance, like with his twitchy, lizard-like mannerisms, and a kind of swagger that suggests both threat and comic horror. Every time he enters a scene, the stakes seem to ratchet up, and he doesn't just oppose Bob in the plot because he opposes him in tone and atmosphere. There's also Teyana Taylor as Perfida Beverly Hills, who for me is one of the film's most magnetic presences. She leads with a fierce authority, showcasing ideological conviction, charisma, and moral complexity. She isn't a simple zealot or caricature of revolution, because there's strength, anger, shades of idealism, and moments where we see her internal conflict. In scenes of confrontation, whether political, personal, or physical, Taylor balances her ferocity with conviction, as she can carry the weight of her beliefs, but she can also carry their cost. Her role helps the film extend beyond Bob's internal struggle to show how collective ideals, leadership, betrayal, and commitment intersect. Next, there's newcomer Chase Infiniti as Willa, who holds her own in a film crowded with larger-than-life performances. As Bob's daughter, she's more than just a motivation for the plot, becoming her own emotional center. She reacts to her father's failings, embodies the next generation's perspectives, and shows resilience, emotional clarity, and an overall strength. Because Willa is often in the crosshairs, she needs to anchor scenes that are heavy with danger and absurdity alike. And Infiniti's performance gives the film its heart, and when she's in scenes with DiCaprio, you believe their familial bond, the tension, and the love between them. And then finally, there's Benicio del Toro as Sensei Sergio in a role that is small, but the actor adds an important dimension to the whole film. As Willa's instructor and a moral guide type figure, he's calm in contrast to Bob's volatility, insightful in places where others are blinded by anger or fear. He embodies a kind of quiet strength, a teacher and a protector with secrets of his own. His performance acts as a counterbalance to the piece, and in scenes of absurd spectacle or high tension, I think Del Toro's sensei offers moments of reflection, trust, and loyalty. It helps give the film a texture, and it's not just protest and violence, but relationships, mentorship, and moral ambiguity. So as a whole, I think the ensemble works beautifully together as they share tone shifts that are dramatic, funny, surreal, terrifying, and also tender. Each major performance isn't just good in isolation, as they all play off each other in ways that heighten all the stakes and emotion. The other aspect that I think is really effective in making this a classic film is the ending itself. It's not just satisfying in terms of plot, but emotionally, thematically, and morally satisfying too. From a plot resolution standpoint, the ending delivers enough closure to feel like the immediate crisis is resolved without pretending that everything is magically fixed. Key threads come together, like Willa's captivity being ended, Bob and Willa being reunited, and Lockjaw's hypocrisy and crimes being exposed. But what's clever is that these resolutions don't erase any of the tension. The world beyond the immediate threat remains fraught. The villain is defeated, but the structures of power, the ideological battles, and the scars of betrayal remain, and that balance keeps the film from sliding into cheap triumphalism. On an emotional level, the ending is powerful because of how it gives agency to Willa, shifts Bob's character, and brings in Perfida in a way that doesn't feel tacked on, but meaningful. Willa isn't just someone who is rescued, as in the end she acts, makes decisions, and even shoots one of her attackers. Her transformation from being protected to being active in the fight is mirrored in Bob's own growth as he learns that protection isn't enough and that holding on too tight can be a kind of imprisonment. Also, the letter from Perfida to her daughter, one that is both apologetic and hopeful, adds emotional complexity to the ending, acknowledging the betrayal and mistakes, but also calling forward to what might be rebuilt. Thematically, the ending is what also makes the whole movie more than just a thriller or action film, as it ties together ideas about memory, identity, family, revolution, and legacy. The fact that Willa goes on to protest at the end suggests that the fight is ongoing and that justice doesn't come in one final battle, but in a continuum. It's a passing of the torch moment as the next generation inherits both hope and burden. The film doesn't pretend the road ahead is easy, but it insists that hope, commitment, and moral truth matter. Finally, there's further a kind of aesthetic and tonal perfection in how the ending lets the film breathe. After so much of the chaos, violence, irony, satire, and emotional upheaval, the final moments show just enough to let the viewer sit with what's been done in the reunions, the unresolved wounds, and the still open questions. It ends with a forward motion and a promise of continuity, showing Willa driving out to join a protest. But it leaves enough unsaid about what comes next, about whether the systems will bend, and about the inner lives of the characters now having to reckon with what's been exposed. That kind of ambiguous hope strikes a tone that feels honest rather than artificially tidy. So in short, the ending is great because it aligns with everything the film has built, delivering on plot, deepening character, sustaining thematic weight, and preserving moral complexity. It doesn't tie every string in a bow, but in doing so, it affirms the movie's core conviction. The real battles, internal and external, go on, but those who choose to keep fighting and those who choose to pass something better on transform what looks like defeat into possibility. Overall, I think One Battle After Another earns its place as a modern masterpiece because it combines Paul Thomas Anderson's artistic daring with urgent, resonant themes, unforgettable performances, and a willingness to challenge its audience rather than simply entertain them. At its core, the film is about cycles of political, personal, and generational struggle, and Anderson threads these ideas through a story that feels at once surreal and deeply human. The central relationship between Bob and his daughter Willa provide the film with its heart, grounding all the satire, absurdity, and action into something emotionally authentic. Around them, an ensemble cast delivers textured, magnetic performances that blur the line between menace and comedy, idealism and corruption. And Anderson also demonstrates technical mastery, shifting seamlessly between genres, whether it's satire, thriller, drama, or action, without ever losing the cohesion. The result is a film that mirrors the chaos of modern life while still carving out moments of clarity and hope. Its ending, which acknowledges that the battle is ongoing and that the next generation must carry the fight forward, cements it as a story that speaks directly to today's fractured political and cultural climate. By refusing easy answers and instead offering a film that is thematically rich, emotionally gripping, and artistically bold, Anderson has created not just a great movie, but a work that feels essential. The rare kind of film that will be studied, debated, and revisited for years to come. But that was my review of One Battle After Another. To those who have seen the film, what did you think of Paul Thomas Anderson's new project, and do you agree with some of the points that I have raised in my review? It's all subjective at the end of the day, and I appreciate the range of reactions and reviews, so let me know down below in the comments section what you thought about the film, alongside things that stood out with your first impressions. For more videos on upcoming film releases like One Battle After Another, then subscribe to the channel and turn on your notifications. Also, if you enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like rating and follow me on social media via the links in the description. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've been Cortex, and as always, make some noise.